I'm not this man's wife, but we live together and we have a child together. And so like, what, as a woman, you hold all the power and you control how men treat you. Your boundaries dictate what you accept. I am not willing to sacrifice what I have set for my husband for a boyfriend. Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Girls in Real Life podcast. I am your host, Mariah Clayton. Happy Monday. Okay, we are literally you guys going to dive right in because I have to be so real and honest with y'all. This is my third time trying to record this episode and I am at my wit's end, honestly, and I hate that I have to start off this episode with this kind of energy because this is not at all what I was expecting to happen. But I have just been having so many technical difficulties. Like, I literally recorded the first half of the episode and I was just flying through. I was doing such a good job. Like, oh my gosh, I was killing it, honestly. And then all of a sudden the power goes out and my camera stopped recording because it's hooked up to like an adapter that's plugged into the wall, which obviously is connected to the power of the house. And when the power went out, my camera shut off and my video has been discarded. Unfortunately, I still have the audio from that, but obviously I don't have the video to go with it. So like now we have to start all the way over. Go to the second take. I am literally stumbling over my words so much. I cannot put a thought together. I'm trying to make it sound as good as the first recording, but obviously like I can't repeat what I've done. So now I'm just tripping over my words and like nothing is going right. So we X that out. And now I've taken like a 15-minute break. I have like recollected my thoughts and I think I am ready to try this again. So please, let's hope and pray that I make it through this episode because I'm at my wit's end, y'all. So I'm sorry that this episode has to start off on this kind of note, but hopefully as we make it through, I just forget about all the bad things that happened before this podcast recording started. So anyways, like I said, we're jumping right in. So let's just go ahead and discuss what we discussing. And we are talking about the reality of being a wife to a boyfriend, okay? Especially as it pertains to being a Christian woman and navigating your spirituality, because I feel like in today's society, there has been a lot of pressure on women to perform wifely duties and act like wives, even though we are not being proposed to or married to. This has obviously been a hot topic on social media, like don't be a wife to a boyfriend, like know your boundaries, know your self-worth, know what you bring to the table without actually giving them the whole meal. And yes, we're going to talk about all of that today. We're going to get into it, but I think the way that I really want to start this episode off is just by sharing my story and my personal experience in navigating this, because this has been something that I've been struggling with for 2 years now. Like it has been a long time that I have like struggled with these thoughts and these feelings that I'm going to be telling you guys about today. And I've wanted to do this episode for such a long time, like probably since the beginning of this year. But every week that I thought I was ready to talk about this and was ready to like lay it all out there, I just was not. But I feel like I'm ready now. And I feel like I'm going to be very vulnerable and open about a lot of things that I've felt internally but never really spoken about out loud. So yeah, I don't know, I'm a little bit nervous. Well, I guess not nervous, but I'm just gonna be very, very vulnerable today, and I don't really know what's going to come out of my mouth. Like obviously I have notes and I have thoughts written down, but it's kind of all over the place, just like how my thoughts are in my mind right now. So I really just hope that I make sense by the end of this video. And yeah, I feel like in today's society, a lot of our lines, especially as it pertains to dating, have become blurred, and a lot of women, like I mentioned earlier, kind of feel this pressure to perform these wifely duties and tasks while we're in relationships with men, because we want to show what we bring to the table. We want to show them our value. We want to show them what life would be like if they were to make us our wives. And like that's totally understandable, but I think at some point there are some men who get very content and very comfortable with the life that they're living, and they're getting the benefit of having a wife without actually making you a wife. And that is where the term being a wife to a boyfriend comes from, because there are a lot of men out here who love that these women are doing so much for them and offering so much of themselves to them that they feel like they don't have to take those next steps because they're already getting everything that they want and desire out of a relationship without having that commitment to go along with it. And I feel like navigating dating as a Christian woman, as a spiritual woman, is just very hard and very difficult because, like I said, a lot of the lines are blurred and we have a certain set of values and boundaries that we want to adhere to, but the men in today's society don't really align or don't really identify with those same beliefs and values. And so now you're having just this constant struggle and this constant battle of trying to date men who don't really see the benefit of all of the boundaries and values that you say that you want to have set as a precedent in your relationship. So like I said, I'm just going to start this episode off by talking about my journey and my experience and the things that I've been feeling in navigating this very weird and unique situation that I am in, because I feel like it's something that a lot of people don't talk about. I actually had one of you guys leave me a comment on a previous video, and I'm just going to read it because it's really going to set the precedent for this entire episode, and I really just want us all to be on the same page. But someone left this comment and it says, "I'm genuinely wondering, so hopefully this does not offend, but how has it been trying to maintain your sexual morality while living with your boyfriend? I assume it can be difficult, especially since a whole baby is in the picture. Did you both decide to try to wait again, or is it beyond that point?" And little does she know that this has been something that I've been struggling with for a very, very long time. And these are questions that I have also asked myself. And like I said, I put this episode off for a very long time, but I feel like her leaving this comment was just confirmation that this is what I'm supposed to be talking about today. And even though I'm going to be sharing a lot of vulnerable things and opening myself up a lot to you guys, I think that it's going to be very helpful and kind of give you guys an inside scoop of what goes on through the mind of someone navigating a situation like this. And if this is your first time seeing me and like you have no idea what my story is, I will give you a very, very quick synopsis of like how I got to where I am. I have a boyfriend. His name is Justin. We have been together for 2 years. 2 months into knowing each other, we got unexpectedly pregnant. We were not even together. We were not in a relationship. We had just started the process of getting to know each other. And now we are pregnant with a child when, you know, we're not even officially together. So navigating that in and of itself was very difficult, and we had to expedite a lot of things in our relationship. The main one being us moving in together and deciding to start our family. Fast forward to now, we, still live together. Our son is 19 months old and we're still learning about each other and navigating this relationship. And I have to be honest with y'all, it's been very hard on me spiritually, because as someone who claims to be a Christian, who claims to be a woman of God, there are a lot of things that people can look at in my life that kind of contradict the things that I'm saying in the life that I'm wanting to live. And honestly, it has kind of made me feel a little bit of a hypocrite, like I feel like I want to be holy in the world, but I'm not even holy at home. So how can I sit here and talk about sin and talk about building a relationship with God and talking about all these things spiritually when I'm not even being holy at home, when I'm not even abiding by the rules and the guidelines that God has set out for me? So it has been this constant struggle for me spiritually and emotionally, with me wanting to honor God while still living in the midst of my sin. And I think a lot of times when women get in these situations where they're committing sexual immorality with a person, or, they get pregnant by someone, a lot of times those things don't work out. So it's easy for them to turn away from that person, to fully repent and start over and live this fresh life without having that baggage of someone that they slept with or someone that they had a child with, because that person is no longer in their life. But I feel like it's a very different situation when you commit sexual immorality with someone, you have a child with someone, and they're still in your life and you still desire to have a relationship with them and you still have a desire for it to work out. Navigating that is now very challenging because you want to be a godly woman and you want to have the chance to start over, but now the lines have become so blurred and so messed up that sometimes it can just seem like it's impossible to do. Like you've crossed so many lines. What is the point of trying to put those boundaries back up? So to answer her first question, how has it been trying to maintain my sexual morality while living with my boyfriend? It has been hard. It has been, quite honestly, the most difficult thing that I think I've ever had to navigate, because how do you put those boundaries back up? How do you say to someone who you have a child with, who you've been consistently engaging in sexual immorality with, how do you tell them, hey, this is how I'm feeling, I'm being convicted by this, and I want to put this boundary back up? Like, it's something that I don't think it's something that I don't think a lot of people would do or agree with. And for me personally, like, this is something that has been constantly on my mind and constantly on my spirit for such a long time, because I do want to honor God with my body, and I do want to be able to be holy at home and holy in the world. I don't want to be a hypocrite. So yes, it is very extremely difficult. And I've had conversations with Justin where I've told him, like, this is how I feel. I'm feeling very convicted. I'm feeling like a hypocrite. I'm feeling like just not good about myself physically and spiritually and emotionally, and like I need to put this boundary back up. Like I need us to stop engaging in sexual immorality, because it is truly affecting my life and my mental health and my spiritual walk with God. And there's no other way for me to navigate this other than to say, like, we have to stop. So to answer her second question, did we both decide to try to wait again, or is it beyond that point? We have decided to wait again. Now, I'm going to be very honest, okay? This is something that has literally, like, we just decided probably like a month and a half ago. I'm not even joking. So this is still something very new that I am navigating, and it is still something that we still consistently struggle with, but we have both made the decision to try to wait again. Not try, we will to wait again. And I did have those thoughts of like, who cares? Like, we already have a child together. We're already living together. Like, we're well beyond the point. Like, everybody already knows that, like, we did the deed. And like, like, I did have those thoughts, like, what is the point? Is it even worth it? And I do think that those thoughts have kind of come from the devil, because he wants us to be comfortable in our sins. He wants us to stay in a cycle of sin, and for us to act like our sin is normal, even though I know in my mind this is not normal. So I think for me, yes, I did have those thoughts, but because I have been being so persistent in my walk with Christ now, and I've been reading my Bible, and I've been spending time with God, and I've been doing the things that I need to do to build my faith and build my spirit, I am now at the point where I can put my spirit over my flesh for what feels like the first time in my life. And I was so convicted by this that I had to say something to Justin in order to put that boundary back up, because for the past 2 years, like, it's been on my mind, and it's been something that I've struggled with, but I had never fully felt the conviction to do it up until a few months ago when we started having this conversation. And I think that's a testament to how much my relationship with God has grown over the past couple of months, because 2 years ago, I would have gave into those thoughts of, yeah, what is the point? Like, we'll just keep going. Like, we're already here. We've already done it. Like, whatever. Right. But I think because I'm growing so much spiritually, my actions are now being reflective of that. And even though to some people, to the general public, it might seem like, why is she doing this? Like, this is so stupid. She lives with him. They have a kid together. Like, there is no point. I'm not doing it for the general public. I'm doing it for myself, and I'm doing it to honor God. And we're the only two people who need to understand why I'm doing that. So even though it might not make sense to you, even though it might not make sense to the general public, it makes sense to me, and it makes sense to God. And that is all that I truly, genuinely care about, because if I'm being honest, I am sick and tired of feeling like a hypocrite in my own house. I am sick and tired of sitting in front of this camera and preaching to you guys and talking to you guys about the gospel and not living it and walking it out in my everyday life. So for me, it has been a no-brainer to now put that boundary back up and say, I don't want to do this anymore until we get married. And I want to honor God with my body and with my choices. And this is how I'm going to do that. And because Justin loves me and because he is on his own walk with Christ at this point in time, it has, I don't want to say it's been easy for us, but it has been something that we have been able to remind ourselves when the temptation is there or when times get tough, is that like it's going to feel good in the moment, but as soon as it's done, we're both going to feel convicted, and that's not going to feel good. And like, I don't want to have to continue falling into the same sin over and over and over again and constantly feeling that conviction when I can just ignore it altogether by just doing what I know that I'm supposed to be doing. So to answer your question, I know that was kind of long-winded, but yes, it has been very difficult navigating this, being with someone who you love and living with someone who you love and having a kid with someone that you love when you've already committed the sexual sin. Like, it is very difficult to navigate that. But for both of us, and especially for me personally, we have both decided to wait again. And I don't think that it's beyond the point. I think that it is the point. I think that now it's such a stronger declaration of like where I'm at on my walk with Christ. And I'm proud of myself. You know, I'm proud of myself for being brave enough to bring up the conversation to Justin. I'm proud of myself for not being afraid that he was going to like react in a huge negative way. Like, it has been a conversation of love and of understanding and of trying to make me feel as comfortable as possible as I can be in my own home. So now that I've kind of dealt with that side of it, the sexual immorality side of it, now I find myself struggling with the wifely side of it, right? Because again, I'm not married. We're not married. Like, we're literally just living together and we have a kid together. Okay. So for me personally, it has been also difficult to navigate the fact that I'm not this man's wife, but we live together and we have a child together. And so like, at what point, you know, do I do wifely things versus doing non-wifely things, right? Like, it's again, it's a weird situation to navigate because even though I'm not technically a wife, we are in a situation where it feels like I should be a wife because yes, we live together. Yes, we have a kid together. Yes, we've been together for 2+ years. And like, there are these expectations of me in our household. And I think for me personally, it's been really hard to flip that switch in my brain because I know in my mind I'm not a wife, and I know in my mind that there are still certain things that I'm not going to do until I become a wife. And what does that look like? How do we navigate this situation? So it's this mental battle of not really being a wife, but feeling this pressure to do wifely things, even though I'm not. And, you know, it's, again, I genuinely, like, I don't even know if I'm making sense at this point, but as you guys can tell, it is a constant ongoing battle and struggle that I have with myself in navigating these very weird and unique situations that I have found myself in. Now, I know for a fact that we have the intentions to become married because obviously if we didn't have the intention, we wouldn't have bought this house together. We wouldn't have, you know, moved in together and been together all this time. Like, obviously the intention is there for us to fully become husband and wife. And when that time comes, I feel like I will gladly be willing to like be fully invested, flip the wife switch on in my brain and like go full throttle. But until that time comes, I find myself being just very hesitant to do certain things because I know in my mind I'm not a wife. So I don't want to act like this. I don't want to do these things. And like, there are some times where I find that Justin like has these expectations of me, and sometimes he feels like I'm not acting like a wife, and that's when I tell him, well, I'm not. You know, like, I'm not your wife. Again, I think for me, in navigating this relationship as spiritually as I can outside of the context of us having a kid and living together, I have to have those boundaries set up for myself in order to dictate like wife versus non-wife, because I feel like if I just fully dive in and act like a wife and be a wife and do the things that a wife does, I don't even know how to describe it. I don't want to say that like the thrill of the commitment is gone, but it's like, what would be the point of the commitment if I'm already doing those things, you know? So for me, it's just like important that I have those boundaries up for myself in order to navigate this very unique and weird situation that I am in, so that I don't feel like I'm being taken advantage of and that I'm doing more than I should. Even though I know Justin is not taking advantage of me, and even though I know that like it would be okay if I were to fully be invested as a wife, I know for me personally, in my mental sanity, like I have to differentiate the two. Like I will be a wife when I need to be a wife, but right now I am not a wife. So there are just certain things that I'm not going to do and certain ways that I'm just not going to act. So what does it mean to be a wife to a boyfriend? Obviously to perform wifely duties, cooking, cleaning, nurturing, emotional stability, like all of the things. But again, you're doing all of these things outside of the covenant of marriage. You're doing all of these things without the promise of there ever being anything more. And I think a lot of women do these things because they had this false belief that if I perform these duties and if I show him like my full self and my full capabilities, then like that is what's going to lead to the commitment in the long run. But in doing so, I feel like us as women, we have created this problem for ourselves, because now when we date these men, they have built up these expectations based off of what previous relationships have been like, based off of how much previous women have given them. And if their previous woman cooked for them, cleaned for them, did their laundry, did all the things that a wife does, and like everything from top to bottom, they are going to now expect that from every single woman that they date. And it is now going to be a girlfriend requirement and not a wifely requirement. And so now you find this generation of women who are consistently being wives to boyfriends because we men have tricked us into thinking that these wifely duties are just mundane girlfriend everyday tasks that you should be doing. And not so much that the men have tricked us, but women have allowed them to weaponize our nurturing and caregiving nature against us. So now the narrative is, you're not a good girlfriend if you don't do X, Y, and Z. You're not a good girlfriend if you don't cook. You're not a good girlfriend if you don't have sex with me this many times a week. You're not a good girlfriend if you don't clean my laundry and I come home to a clean house every single day. Like we now these are like 100% expectations of just like every foundational relationship, which in my mind is not good, because at that point, like, what are you even working towards? Like, what would even be the point of getting into a committed relationship, taking vows under God and like putting on rings and getting the paperwork right? Like, what would be the point if you can do all of that without having to go through all of that, you know? So I feel like this in turn has created just this unhealthy balance between men and women and like the expectations of each other, because there are a lot of women out here who will give everything to a man and who will lay it all out there on the line for them, and they're now expecting that from every single woman that they come into contact with. But as Christians and as people who, you know, believe in marriage, we understand the weight that marriage holds. We understand how important it is and how impactful it can be on a person's life, and we take it very, very seriously. The Bible has very clearly outlined the covenant of what a marriage is, and how powerful it is, of two people becoming one, and a woman leaving her family to be tied to another human being for the rest of her life and starting their own family, and like what that looks like. God takes marriage as something very serious, and it's very precious to him, because the church is his bride, you know, like he loves the church so much, and he showed us that love by literally dying on the cross. So like it's a covenant that should be taken very, very seriously from a religious and a spiritual perspective. But just like the world does with everything else, it has been warped. You know, it has now become something where people are like, it's just a piece of paper, like who cares, it's not that important. But if we read the Bible and if we really dive into the word, then you would be willing and able to understand and see why marriage is so important. So dating with the intention to marry should be a season of preparation for the role that you will take on as a wife to that person. Dating should not be a place to prematurely take on the roles that should be saved strictly for marriage. And that is where the disconnect is, because we feel like when we're dating someone, we should give it all, and we should show them like this is exactly how we're going to be as a wife, and we should live with them, and we should see how they live in their everyday life before we marry them, and we should, do a trial run on the sex a few times to make sure that it's what we want, right? Like we've put all of these things in our mind that have made us view dating as more important than the actual marriage, like we're showing our cards so early on in this dating stage that we're forgetting the process of preparing for what it means to be a husband and a wife. So when we're dating, we have to make sure that we're living in obedience. We have to make sure that we're abiding by the rules that God has laid out for us, because if you don't, there are bad things that could happen. Like literally, I am living proof of what could happen when you do things outside of the covenant of marriage. You are now dealing with thoughts and emotions that you should not be experiencing had you just been obedient in the boundaries and the parameters that God had set for you from the beginning. I wouldn't be feeling like a hypocrite in my own home if I had just abstained from sex and gotten and done things the right way. But because I didn't, obviously there are going to be consequences for that. And I had to go through those things in order to understand why the parameters and the boundaries were so important in the first place. And I really hope that like my personal experience can hit home exactly why this is so important. The thing is, as women, we have the power. I don't care what anyone else says, what anyone has told you. As a woman, you hold all the power and you control how men treat you. If a man believes that they can walk all over you, they will. If a man gives an inch and you let them take a mile, they will do that to you, right? So you have to be standing so firm and so strong in your values and your boundaries so that they know you're not one to play with. Like, you're not the woman that's going to be sleeping with them on the first night or before marriage. You are not the woman that's going to be coming over and cooking them dinner every single night. You are not the woman that's going to be cleaning their house and doing their laundry just because they want you to, right? Like, you have to be willing to stand so firm and so strong in your values and hold that place as a girlfriend, so that they know the commitment that's going to come with you will come with so much more, right? Like, you can tell someone how you're going to be as a wife without showing them how you're going to be as a wife. You have to be willing to set those boundaries and be like, look, when we get engaged, when we move in together and we're married and we're one, this is what I'm going to do for you, and this is how your life is going to be, and this is how I'm going to take the load off of you and nurture you and care for you. But until that time comes, I am not willing to sacrifice what I have set for my husband for a boyfriend at this moment in time. And if that man honors you and he respects your boundaries, then he just might be the one, okay? But if he looks at you like you crazy, like, oh, if you don't do this for me, then I'm out, you don't want that man anyway. So you need to be willing to stand firm in your values and your boundaries and trust and know that the right man will come along and honor that and be grateful that you're saving that part of yourself just for them, for your husband. At the end of the day, you control how men treat you. You have to be willing to set up those boundaries and those parameters, not only just for yourself, but for them as well, so that they don't become complacent, so that they don't get these unrealistic expectations of what you're going to be doing in their day-to-day life until you marry them, right? Like, it's for both of you, but it's mainly for you and your sanity and your spirituality. Because if you give wifely energy to someone too soon in the relationship, there are too many bad things that could happen. Number one, you will probably experience a burnout, right? Because you are investing so much more than what you're getting back, and you're just constantly giving, and the other person is just taking, and never giving you the reprieve and the love and the care that you need as well. So this in turn can lead to like emotional exhaustion. Like, you are just so tired of doing everything and getting nothing in return. The next thing you might feel could be resentment. Feeling resentment because you feel like you're doing everything. Feeling resentment because they're not reciprocating the same energy. And so like, what are you getting out of it? They're not meeting your expectations. So like you're feeling resentful about all of the things that you're doing for them because they're not doing the same for you, right? Like the last thing that you want to do is harbor resentment against somebody, because this is just not a good place to be. The third way being a wife to a boyfriend can backfire on you is you lose your sense of identity. Like you've wrapped so much of yourself in this person. You've wrapped so much of your value in the things that you have to do that like now you don't even know who you are anymore outside of that role. And that's not fair to you. You know, it's not fair for you, for your entire identity to be wrapped up in the things that you do for another person, right? Like you still need to be willing to have those things that you're doing for yourself. And if you're constantly doing for other people, it's going to be way too easy to lose yourself in the midst of everything else. And then the last danger of like giving it all to someone too soon is you are now delaying the possibility of a true marriage, right? And I've said this before already, but because men get so comfortable and so complacent and they have all these expectations of you, they are now delaying the actual act of marriage, because again, there's no point. Like you're giving it all here in this season. So what would be the point of them like taking the next step and getting down on a knee and proposing to you and marrying you when they don't have to do all of that, right? Like they get to have everything that they want right here without the commitment that comes with it. So you have to just be very, very careful with the pieces of yourself that you are giving away to someone, because it could truly hinder the natural progression of the relationship. I can't lie. Like me and Justin have also had these conversations. Like I had to tell him, don't think that just because we're living together and because we have a child together, that means that I don't want to be married. Like this is still something that I'm working towards and that we need to be working towards together. And if that is not your intention, then like you need to let me know now. But obviously we're both on the same page with that. So like it's good and it's okay. But again, there are some times where I don't want to say I have resentment, but there are some times where I question myself, where it's just like, dang, like why did you have to give it all? Like why did you have to give him your body? Why did you have to give him like all of these things? And that has now caused me to give him so much more of myself than I ever planned to give him, right? And it sucks, but that's just like the reality of the situation. Like I gave it all to him, and now it's like I have to remind you, hey, we're still working towards this. Like this is still the end goal here. Like don't get too comfortable and complacent in this season of our life, because I'm telling you right now, that's not how this is gonna fly. But again, I think if you have found yourself in a position like me and you did give it all away too soon, like those conversations are very important. Like you need to just be very open and transparent about it, because the last thing either of you guys want to do is become complacent with where you are and not continue to work towards something even greater than what you have. Even though I gave it all away, even though we're living together and we're not married, even though we have a kid together and we're not married, even though there are still some things that I didn't think that I would be doing until I was a wife that I still do now, I still bring value, and I still have enough sense of self-worth to let him know that like, look, just because I'm doing X, Y, and Z, and just because A, B, and C happened, we're still getting down the altar and we're still saying our I do's at the end of the day. So again, you need to stand firm in your values and understand and know your self-worth, that even though you might be in a situation where you feel like you've given too much to a person, you still have the ability and you should be willing to be able to put those boundaries back up and just talk to your partner and say, hey, this is how I'm feeling, like, and I don't like it, and I want to be able to put this boundary back up because I want to know that like we're still working towards something. And if he's okay with that, then great. Like y'all can work on that and navigate it together like me and Justin are doing. And if he doesn't want to honor that boundary, if he has that question of like, well, what's the point? Like we already did. He's not the one. Okay. I don't want you feeling like you have to prove yourself to someone. I don't want you feeling like you have to do certain actions or you have to perform for love, because that's not what love is. Love is not conditional. Love is not based on, well, if you do this and if you do this and if you do that, then I'll marry you. That's not love. Love is unconditional. Love is, I'm going to love you regardless of anything else. So you have to understand your worth, and you have to know that that worth comes internally from yourself, but it also comes from God. It doesn't come from man. It doesn't come from the person who you're in a relationship with. You have to know and understand what your value and what your self-worth is. You have to be willing to establish strong and healthy boundaries while you're dating. You have to be willing to protect yourself emotionally and spiritually when it comes to things like this, because no one else will. And if you don't put up those boundaries, like I said before, you control the way that men treat you. So if those boundaries are not up, he's going to take it and run, girl. So you have to be willing to have those boundaries up. You have to be willing to understand the power of no and not be afraid to say no because you don't want to lose someone, right? Like, they need to be afraid to say no to accepting your boundary because they will lose you. A man who truly sees your value, a man who truly sees your self-worth will not ask you to give it all away without a commitment, will not even blink twice when you ask to set up a boundary that has already been broken, because he will understand. He will know that this is not just something that's going to be given to him. It's something that he's going to have to earn and something that he's going to have to work for. Relationships should be based on mutual respect. The more respect that someone has for you, the more that they're going to be willing to honor a boundary that you have set up. The more respect that someone has for you, the more that they're going to understand you and where you're coming from and why you feel the need to do the things you do, to have the values that you do, to have the boundaries that you do. So how do we get on this path to a healthy God-centered relationship? How do we find men who are going to honor us and respect us in the way that we want them and need them to? Number one, you have to have discernment, okay? Discernment is so important, because your discernment is like your intuition. It's when you go on your first date and you just have a really bad feeling about somebody and you know that you shouldn't talk to them again. It's that feeling where you know when someone is faking it and when they're being very serious about you as a person. That first gut feeling is going to tell you so much about a person. And the only way you get good discernment is if you are, in your word and you're building that relationship with God, so that you can hear him very clearly when you're going on dates and when you're meeting people, and like, he's going to tell you, okay, they got some potential. Okay, maybe they don't have none at all. Like, run, walk away now, So you need to be having this relationship with God to where you know that he's leading you in the right direction. Number two, you need to have boundaries, and you need to know what those boundaries are before you get into a very serious relationship with someone, right? Like, you need to have such a strong set of values. I've said it so much in this episode, but your values and your boundaries have got to be rock solid, and they cannot waver for anyone. Like, your boundaries dictate what you accept. And if your boundaries are very lackluster and they're not very strong, and you're like, oh, I'm just go with the flow, like, I don't really care, like, it just depends on the person. No, that cannot be you, because you are going to attract the wrong kind of person, and you are going to get into this mode of wanting to fix them, and it's just not going to work out, right? So you need to be willing to only entertain people that align with the boundaries and the values that you have set for yourself. Okay, these are literally your moral standards, and you have to take them very, very seriously. Number three, you need to discuss your intentions with this person. Once you know that they're going to honor your boundaries, once you know that they align with where you are in your value system and your morals, now we need to discuss intentions, okay? What do you want out of this relationship? Do you just want a girlfriend for the moment? Do you just want a friends with benefits? Do you want a wife? Like, is that something that you're trying to work towards? The quicker that you find out their intentions, the quicker that you'll be able to realize if this person is for you or not. Because their intentions and their actions behind their intentions are going to show you so much about who they are as a person and what they want out of life. So you need to make sure that you're having those open conversations with that person so that y'all can consistently be on the same page. Which brings me to number 4. You are going to communicate openly and honestly. Even though a lot of people say communication is the most important part of a relationship, for some reason, it can be the hardest, right? Especially if you're having hard conversations and you're bringing up things that are maybe uncomfortable to talk about, or you're unsure about how this person is going to feel, right? Like, it can be really hard to discuss things openly and honestly and transparently and trust someone with all of your emotions and feelings and secrets, right? Like, it can be really scary. But that's what you have to do in order to get to the point to where you want to be. If you don't communicate, if you don't have these very serious conversations, y'all will never know if you're on the same page. You will never know how the other person is truly feeling. And that is what is most important, is like, y'all need to just consistently be communicating so you know how you're feeling in the relationship. What do you need more of? What do you need less of? What do you want to work towards? How are you going to handle finances? How are we going to raise our kids? You know, like, these are all very important questions that you're going to have to ask this person, and like very deep conversations that you're going to have. What traumas did you experience when you were younger? You know, like, you gotta go deep, and you have to be willing to share pieces of yourself that you've never shared with anyone else. And in order for you to feel safe doing that, it goes all the way back to discernment. It goes all the way back to knowing and believing that you can trust this person with these very, very soft and treasured pieces of yourself. And then number 5 of how to have a healthy and God-centered relationship, you have to keep God first. That is God-centered, okay? Like, you have to be willing and able to keep God first in your relationship. This means praying together. This means reading the Bible together. This means discussing things that you've read and that you've talked about and that you've heard in sermons, right? Like, it needs to be God in the center of it all, and it always has to go back to God. Every argument you have needs to go back to God. Every misunderstanding that you have needs to go back to God. Everything, like literally everything, has to go back to him in order for this to work, so that he can consistently keep you guys on the path that you need to go on. Because the minute that somebody slips with their relationship with God in their relationship, now your boundaries can be compromised. Now your value system can be compromised. Now you're thinking about doing things that you never thought about doing before, like maybe having sex before marriage, because you're not reading your word and you're not feeling that conviction. And you've been living too much in the world. So now you feel like, oh, I can do this, right? So it's very, very important to keep God at the center of your relationship. And that's something that I'm so proud that me and Justin have done over the past few months, is that, you know, we're both reading our Bible. We're both praying. We're both in our word. And it leaves very little room for error as it pertains to sexual immorality, but also just other sins in general. Being able to keep God first and like have that be the precedent of your relationship is what's going to make it successful. So yeah, I honestly think that's the end, guys. I'm gonna wrap it up here. I know I've been talking for a little while, but I really hope that this episode just empowered, especially my young women listening. It empowered you to like set those boundaries, be firm in your values, maybe reevaluate where you are in your current relationship. Is there a boundary that you might want to put back up because you feel like you've been lacking in a certain area, right? Like, it's okay to revisit those conversations, even if you've been in a long-term relationship, right? Like, these are constant things that are going to be changing and evolving. And as you grow in your walk with Christ, there are going to be certain things that you're convicted about. And you have to be willing to bring those up to that person and communicate openly and honestly so that you guys can navigate it together. That's what me and Justin have done. We are not perfect, okay? I am not sitting here telling you guys this so that y'all can look at me any certain kind of way. Like, no, I am still openly struggling. I am still openly battling my flesh every single day. And like, we are just navigating this as best as we can, so that I can like have a peace of mind about my spirituality and my emotions and like where we are as a couple. Because like I said, it has been a struggle, and it's been a lot of back and forth, and it's been a lot of me questioning myself and questioning if I'm good enough and questioning if it's even worth it and questioning if God still loves me. And it's like, at the end of the day, I know he does. At the end of the day, I know that he is working all of these decisions that I made outside of his will for my good. And obviously is using my story to hopefully help someone else. And like, if I wouldn't have gone through the things that I've gone through, I wouldn't be speaking about half of the things that I do on this podcast, right? So even though it's very difficult for me to navigate and to be open and transparent about it, because it's something that I'm literally going through right now, I know in the end that it's helping people. And that's all that matters. And if me being real about my situation allows someone else to reevaluate theirs and hopefully get back right on their walk with God, then oh my goodness, that would just make me so, so happy, because it would mean that my struggle is actually worth it. Like, it would mean that the things that I'm going through actually hold value, and it doesn't make me any less of a person. Because I have to be honest, sometimes I do feel that way. Like, sometimes when I'm thinking about it too deeply and I'm thinking about all of the ways that I should have done things the right way, I feel like I don't bring any value, and I feel like I shouldn't even have any room to say anything to anyone, because like, look at how my life turned out. Like, it's super messy and it's super complicated, but nobody's life is perfect, and I'm realizing that on my walk with Christ, and I am just taking it day by day, and I am just being obedient to God when he tells me to move and doing the things that he's telling me to do. And he told me to stop engaging in sexual immorality with the man that I live with and with the man that I have a child with. So I have to obey, and I have to be willing to make that conviction so strong in my heart to where it makes me not want to do those things anymore. I gave everything away to my boyfriend. I gave it all, right? But I still know my value, and I still know my worth, and he does too. And for us to be able to openly have those conversations has really helped me navigate my spirituality in a new way. And now I don't feel like a hypocrite, like, even though from the outside looking in, people might think, oh, she's preaching the gospel and she's talking about God, but she's living with a man and she has a baby outside of marriage. Like, I don't care what man has to say. I don't care what anyone thinks about my situation, because I know what it is, and I know how hard I've worked to navigate it to get to the point to where I am now, to be okay spiritually. And that's just where I'm at. That's not to say I'm perfect. That's not to say we might not slip up, because maybe we will, but so far we've been doing okay. And so far, this is what has been working for us. And I feel like a weight has been lifted. And I hope that if you are experiencing the same situation, or if you are, looking to date and you've never experienced any of these things before, I hope that I was able to help you in some way, that my story and my feelings and my thoughts and my opinions have ignited something in you to make you want to be better and to look at dating in today's society in a completely different way. So yeah, at this point, I'm just rambling, but I just want to thank you guys so much. I don't want to get emotional. Oh my God, I literally hate myself right now. I just want to thank you guys so much for allowing me to have a safe space to talk about my feelings and my emotions and like what I'm going through, because I'm sorry, because it really does mean a lot to me. And like, this podcast is kind of like my weekly therapy sessions, and even though I get so scared and so nervous about what you guys will think about what I'm saying, I know that I'm just doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And I just thank you guys so much for all of the nice comments and sharing your own stories with me and your own feelings, because I know that I'm not alone. And that's the whole reason I started this podcast, was because I didn't want women to feel alone in what they were feeling. And I want to talk about the things that nobody else talks about. So I just thank you guys for giving me such a safe space to just be myself. So yeah. Sorry. I just get emotional sometimes. But yeah, if you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the podcast. Leave me a nice little comment down below. 5-star rating, all the things. You can follow us on social media at Girls IRL Pod. And I think that is it. So I'm going to go now, because literally, y'all, I'm so tired of talking and I don't want to cry again. So I love you so much. I hope you have a great Monday, a great week, and I'll talk to you in my next episode. Bye.